the Titanomachy, the brutal war that birthed Olympus. From the swirling mists of primordial time, from the fertile cradle of Western civilization, a mountain rises, not of mere rock and ice but of myth, of power, of divine mandate. This is Olympus, the shining city on the peak of the world, home to the pantheon of gods who command the winds, the seas, and the very destiny of humankind. Welcome to the Eldritch Codex. To mortal eyes and to the bards who sang their praises, Olympus was the sublime ideal, a city of perfect colonnades and golden palaces, where ambrosia and nectar flowed freely, where laughter and music echoed through halls untouched by sorrow or death. It was the seat of Zeus, the king of gods and men, whose thunderbolt enforced a new era of cosmic order. It was the home of Athena's wisdom, Apollo's artistry, and Hera's regal authority, a celestial paradise, the pinnacle of beauty and might, a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. But light by its very nature casts shadows, and the brighter the light, the deeper and darker those shadows become. Today, we do not merely gaze upon the gleaming facade of this divine metropolis. We shall walk its halls. We will admire its celestial architecture. Yes, but we will also seek out the doors that are locked, the corridors that are hidden, and the chilling whispers that reverberate through its foundations of gold and marble. For Olympus is not just a city of gods. It is a monument to their triumphs, but also a prison for their secrets. It is a place of sublime creation and of terrifying cruelty, of divine justice and of the most profound, capricious injustice. Join us as we explore Mount Olympus, the shining city and its darkest hidden corridors. Before time, as we mortals understand it, was given its name, before the sun and moon were tasked with their celestial dance, there was the void. And from that void came the first beings, the protogenoi, Gaia the earth, Uranus the sky. These were not gods of personality and passion, but vast living concepts. And from their union came the first dynasty of divine rulers, the Titans. For an age they reigned. This was the so-called Golden Age under the rule of the Titan king Cronus. But let us not be fooled by the poet's fancy. It was not golden in the sense of justice or enlightenment. It was an age of raw, untamed, primal power. An age of giants who could move mountains and drink rivers dry. The world under the Titans was a place of terrible majesty, a world of instinct and force, but it lacked a crucial element, order. For the king of the Titans himself ruled from a throne built upon a foundation of paranoia and an unforgivable crime. Cronus was the son of Uranus and Gaia. His father Uranus was a cruel sovereign, fearful of his own powerful children. He imprisoned two sets of his offspring, the Cyclopes, the one-eyed master craftsmen, and the Centimanes, the monstrous and mighty hundred-handed ones deep within the womb of their mother, Gaia. The earth groaned in pain from this living prison, and she pleaded with her Titan children for vengeance. Only one was bold enough and ambitious enough to answer her call. Cronus. From his mother, he received an adamantine sickle, a blade that could not be chipped or broken. He lay in wait for his father, and in a moment of cosmic betrayal, he ambushed Uranus, seized him, and with one terrible swing of the sickle, he castrated him. He severed the sky from the earth, and in doing so severed the old reign of power. From the blood that fell upon the earth were born the Furies and the giants. From the severed members cast into the sea, a foam gathered, and from it arose Aphrodite, a goddess of beauty born from an act of supreme violence. Cronus had seized the throne. He had answered his mother's plea. But in his moment of triumph, a curse was laid upon him. As his father fell, a prophecy was spoken, that Cronus too would be undone by his own child. And so the new king became a prisoner of the future. The prophecy became the master of the cosmos. Paranoia, cold and sharp as the sickle he once wielded, became his chief counselor. He married his sister, the gentle Titaness Rhea, and together, They would bring forth the next generation of gods. A generation Cronus swore would never see the light of day. The first was born, Hestia, a goddess of the hearth of serene and gentle flame. But as Rhea presented her, Cronus, his eyes wide with terror and a grim resolve, seized the divine infant. He did not imprison her as his father had done. His solution was more direct, more visceral, more absolute. He opened his cavernous mouth and swallowed his daughter whole, imprisoning her not in the earth, but in the living darkness of his own being. Rhea's horror was absolute, but she was powerless before the might of her husband. Another child was born, Demeter, who would hold the secrets of the harvest and the fertile earth. She too was devoured, a goddess of life consumed by the fear of death. Then came Hera, a queen in her cradle, destined for rule, but her first kingdom was the gullet of her father. Then Hades, a lord of the unseen, solemn and powerful, was consigned to an even deeper darkness. And finally Poseidon, the rumbling power of the sea born on a mountaintop, only to be swallowed by a tyrant's dread. 5 gods, a pantheon unborn, suspended in a stasis of flesh and paranoia. Rhea was heartbroken, her divine children trapped, their power neutralized, their destiny stolen. This was the great dark secret of the Titan's reign. The king of the cosmos was a cannibal, a jailer of his own progeny. The golden age was a lie, built upon a foundation of stolen futures. But fate, the one force that even a Titan king cannot devour, would not be denied. As she prepared to give birth to her 6th child, Rhea, her heart hardened by grief and rage, devised a desperate plan. She sought the counsel of her parents, Gaia and Uranus, who lamented the actions of their son. They helped her spirit away the newborn to the rugged, remote island of Crete. And to the waiting, monstrous Cronus, Rhea presented not a child, but a stone, a rock roughly the size and weight of an infant, wrapped in swaddling clothes. Blinded by his fear, the king of the Titans did not look closely. He seized the bundle and swallowed the stone, believing he had once again cheated the prophecy. He was satisfied. He was safe. He was a fool. For on Crete, in a deep cave on Mount Ida, the future was crying its first breath. The child's name was Zeus. He was nursed not by his mother, but by the goat Amalthea, whose horn would later become the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. He was raised by the gentle nymphs of the forest, and his infant cries, which might have carried on the wind to his father's ear, were drowned out by the ceaseless rhythmic clash of spears against shields, performed by the Curetes, armored male dancers, guardians tasked by Rhea to protect the hidden god. Here in secret, far from the paranoid court of Othries, Zeus grew. He grew in strength, in wisdom, and in righteous fury. He was the stone that had not been swallowed, the gear in the cosmic machine that Cronus had not accounted for. He learned of his father's crime, of his imprisoned siblings, of the prophecy he was destined to fulfill. His destiny was not to be a prisoner, but a liberator, a revolutionary, and a usurper. His time had come. When he reached the fullness of his power, Zeus left Crete. He returned to the court of the Titans, not as a conquering son, but in disguise. With the help of the Titanomachy, the personification of cunning wisdom, he became his father's cupbearer. He served Cronus wine, but on one fateful day, he mixed a potent potion into the drink, an emetic, a gift from Metis. Cronus drank deeply. A sickness churned within him. The great king doubled over, his body racked with a convulsion that shook the foundations of Mount Othries. And then the horror of his reign was reversed in a grotesque spectacle of rebirth. First, he regurgitated the stone he had swallowed in Zeus's place, the Omphalos stone, which would later be placed at Delphi to mark the center of the world. Then, one by one, his children were expelled from their fleshy prison. But they did not emerge as infants. They emerged as they were meant to be. Fully formed gods, their powers undiminished, burning with the cold fury of a lifetime spent in darkness. Poseidon, clutching the phantom shape of a trident. Hades, cloaked in an aura of shadow. Hera, her regal gaze already filled with a fearsome intensity. Demeter and Hestia, their gentle natures hardened by their unjust imprisonment. They stood before their father, a new pantheon liberated and ready for war. And at their head stood their brother, their savior Zeus. The battle lines were drawn, the challenge was issued, and the cosmos held its breath. The war to end all wars, the battle for the soul of creation, was about to begin. The Titanomachy. For 10 long years the universe trembled. This was not a war of mortal men with swords and shields. This was a war of gods, a cataclysm that reshaped the very fabric of reality. The elder gods, the Titans, led by Cronus and his formidable brothers, fought from their fortress on Mount Othrys. The young gods, the new generation, made their stand on the towering peak of Mount Olympus. The scale of the conflict is almost beyond mortal comprehension. The earth screamed as mountains were ripped from their foundations and hurled across the sky as crude projectiles. The oceans boiled where the combatants fell. The heavens themselves were a canvas of destructive fire, as divine energies were unleashed in their purest, most terrifying form. Yet for 10 years there was a stalemate. The sheer brute strength of the Titans was matched by the fierce, focused power of the new gods. They were locked in a cosmic deadlock, and the world suffered under the strain. Zeus, a brilliant strategist as well as a powerful warrior, knew that force alone would not win this war. An alliance was needed, a secret weapon had to be found, and he knew just where to look. Guided by the ancient wisdom of Gaia, who now favored her grandchildren over her tyrannical son, Zeus descended. He traveled downwards past the realm of mortals, past the gates of the underworld, down into the deepest, blackest pit of creation, a place of eternal punishment, a prison for the enemies of the cosmos. He descended into Tartarus. There, in the crushing darkness, he found the prisoners his own father had feared, the Cyclopes and the Centimanes, his own uncles, imprisoned since the beginning of time. He slew their guard camp, a monstrous chimera of a creature, and broke their chains. The beings he freed were terrifying to behold. The Cyclopes Brontes, Steripes, and Argesh Thunderer, Lightner and Flasher. Giants with a single burning eye in the center of their foreheads, their hands possessing a skill for the forge that was unmatched in all creation. And their brothers, the Centimanes Catos, Briareus, and Gigest 100-handed ones. Beings of such overwhelming might that they possessed 50 heads to survey the battlefield and 100 powerful arms to unleash destruction. Freed from their eternal torment, these primal beings swore allegiance to Zeus. Their gratitude was not given in words but in deeds. They set to work in their subterranean forges, the fires of which burned with the heat of the world's core. For the new gods, they would craft weapons of such power that they would turn the tide of the war and become legends in their own right. To Hades, the eldest brother, they gave the Cuni, the helm of darkness, a helmet crafted from the shadows of the underworld itself, which could render its wearer completely invisible to the eyes of gods and men. It was a weapon of stealth, of terror, of the unseen attack. To Poseidon, the lord of the waters, they gave the trident, a 3-pronged spear of such immense power that a single strike could shake the earth to its foundations, bringing forth earthquakes, tidal waves, and maelstrom. It was the raw power of the planet focused into a single point. And for Zeus, the king of the new pantheon, they forged the ultimate weapon. They captured the very essence of the storm, harnessing the power of thunder and lightning. They created the Kuranos, the thunderbolts, not mere flashes of light, but divine spears of celestial energy, capable of shattering any defense and striking down any foe. It was the symbol of ultimate authority, the power of the sky made manifest in his hand. Armed and allied, the Olympians returned to the fight, and the stalemate was broken. The climax of the Titanomachy was an apocalypse. From the unseen, Hades moved among the Titan ranks, his helm of darkness sowing confusion and fear, striking at their leaders from the shadows. On the plains, Poseidon slammed his trident into the earth, and the ground itself became a weapon, splitting open in vast chasms, swallowing entire platoons of Titan warriors. The very foundations of Mount Othrys began to crumble under the relentless earthquakes. And from the peak of Olympus, Zeus unleashed his full fury. The sky turned black, not with night, but with the storm of his making. He hurled his thunderbolts one after another, bolts of pure, blinding energy that screamed through the air and exploded against the peaks of Othrys, shattering its rock and setting its forests ablaze. But the final, overwhelming blow came from the Centaurs. Standing on the front lines, the three giants became a living artillery. With their 300 arms, they began to pick up rocks, not pebbles, but boulders the size of hills, and they unleashed a volley of such magnitude that the sky was darkened by their barrage. 300 boulders at a time, a constant crushing avalanche of stone that buried the Titan forces, breaking their lines and their spirits. The power was too great. The assault was too relentless. The Titans, for all their strength, were overwhelmed. Their reign was over. Cronus, the great king, the child devourer, was deposed. He and his male Titan allies who had fought against the Olympians were seized. But they were not killed. Immortals cannot truly die. Instead, they were sentenced to the very prison they had once used to cage their own kin. They were cast down, falling for 9 days and 9 nights, until they reached the pit of Tartarus. There they were bound in unbreakable chains, forged by the Cyclopes, to spend eternity in the crushing darkness. Their roars of eternal frustration, a faint grim echo, a reminder of the price of failure. And so the war ended. The chaos subsided. And on the victor's peak, a new order was established. The foundations of a great shining city were laid. Olympus, a symbol of order, of cosmic law, of a new era ruled by a new pantheon. But we must never ever forget the nature of its birth. This glorious city of light, this bastion of celestial authority, was not born from a peaceful treaty or a divine consensus. It was born from a bloody 10-year war. It was founded upon an act of rebellion against the previous generation. Its shining gates are a monument to a successful coup. Its golden thrones were seized in an act of cosmic violence. The foundations of Olympus, for all their gleaming marble and gold, are cemented in the blood of family. Its serene peace is guaranteed by the eternal torment of its predecessors, locked away in the darkest corridor of creation. This is the first and the most fundamental of Olympus's secrets. Its glorious light could only exist because of a terrifying absolute darkness. And the gods who would reside there, now masters of the universe, would forever carry the shadow of the war they fought and the king they overthrew. The new order was born, but it would never forget the sins of the father, nor the violence of its own conception. The war was over. The screams from the pit of Tartarus had faded into a distant, grim memory. A new age of cosmic stability had dawned, and its seat of power was here. Olympus, the shining city, a testament to victory. But with victory came the spoils, and the universe itself was now a kingdom to be divided. The three great brothers, sons of Cronus, who had together engineered the fall of the old world, gathered to determine their new domains. They did not contest or battle. The bonds forged in war were still strong. Instead, they drew lots, leaving their fates to a power beyond even their own might. To Poseidon fell the dominion of the shimmering, restless seas. From the sunlit surface to the crushing, lightless depths, all that moved within the waters would answer to his call. To Hades, the eldest, fell the vast, unseen realm below the earth. The kingdom of the dead, rich with the mineral wealth of the world, a silent, solemn empire of shadow and finality. Hades would not reside on Olympus, his presence a constant, somber reminder of the mortality from which the other gods were insulated. And to Zeus, the youngest, the liberator, the commander-in-chief of the great war, fell the grandest prize, the vast expanse of the heavens and the dominion over the earth. He became the undisputed king of gods and men, the ultimate arbiter, the patriarch of the new divine family. His throne would be the highest on Olympus. And so the pantheon assembled. 12 thrones for 12 great powers. A family tasked with maintaining the order they had fought so hard to create. Let us now walk the golden halls and meet the residents of this shining city. But as we do look closer, listen past the celestial hymns. For this is a family portrait, and in every family portrait, there are smiles that hide secrets, gazes that betray resentment, and shadows that stretch long behind the brilliant figures in the foreground. Zeus, the luminous king, the predatory storm. At the center of it all sits Zeus, the pater deus, the sky father. His palace is the grandest, his pronouncements law. He is the guardian of Xenia, the sacred duty of hospitality, punishing mortals who dare to harm a guest. He is the bringer of justice, the upholder of oaths, his thunderbolt a swift and final judgment for kings who break their vows. His eagle soars above the world, a symbol of his all-seeing gaze, his dominion absolute. He represents order, patriarchy, the firm hand that holds the chaotic forces of the universe in check. This is Zeus, the shining king, the architect of peace. But the light cast by his throne is blinding, and it serves to hide the darkness that thrives in his personal corridors. For the king of the gods, the great enforcer of cosmic law, was a slave to his own passions. His lust was a force as untamable and destructive as any storm he could conjure. He was a being of absolute power and zero impulse control. His desires were not mere whims. They were cosmic events that tore through the lives of gods, nymphs, and mortals alike, leaving chaos and tragedy in their wake. He was a serial predator, a master of deception and disguise, and the very concept of consent was utterly alien to his nature. To the Spartan queen Leda he came disguised as a swan, graceful and majestic, seeking refuge from a pursuing eagle. In this deceptive form he assaulted her. From this violent union came eggs, and from those eggs hatched Helen, whose beauty would later burn the city of Troy to the ground, and her brother Pollux. The king who demanded order from the world had just sown the seeds for its most famous and devastating war. To the Phoenician princess Europa, gathering flowers by the shore, he appeared as a magnificent white bull, gentle of eye and with horns like a crescent moon. Charmed by the creature, she adorned it with flowers and foolishly climbed upon its back. Instantly, the bull charged into the sea, abducting her from her homeland and carrying her across the waves to the island of Crete. He had stolen her body and future, for his own fleeting pleasure. For Danae, a princess locked away in a bronze chamber by a father terrified of a prophecy, no mortal barrier could stop him. He simply transformed himself into a shower of golden rain, flowing through the cracks in the roof to impregnate her. The resulting child was the hero Perseus. But the story is not one of romance. It is a story of divine power utterly disrespecting and violating mortal agency. Swan, bull, golden rain, eagle, satyr, even her own husband's form, his deceptions were endless. Each affair was a testament to his power, but each was also a betrayal of his sacred marriage, a crack in the foundation of the very order he was meant to uphold. The king was the greatest source of the world's chaos, and for every act of divine infidelity, a corresponding and often more terrible act of divine retribution would follow. For the brightest light in Zeus's life cast the darkest shadow. His sister, his wife, his queen. Hera, the regal queen, the architect of vengeance. Hera, sister-wife to the king, the queen of heaven. She is the goddess of marriage, women, the sanctity of the family, and the legitimacy of childbirth. In the shining city, she is the matron of honor, the symbol of the unbreakable bond that forms the bedrock of society. Her position is one of immense power and prestige. She is the great lady of Olympus, respected and feared. But the corridors of Hera's palace are paved with ice. They echo not with laughter, but with the grinding of teeth and the whispers of plots born from a singular, all-consuming emotion, jealousy. As the goddess of marriage, every one of Zeus's affairs was not just a personal betrayal, but a cosmic insult, a sacrilege against her very domain. Her husband, the one being in the universe sworn to honor her, repeatedly and flagrantly defiled the institution she embodied. Unable to truly punish her omnipotent husband, Hera's boundless rage, denied its true target, became a twisted and terrifying force. Like a river blocked by a dam, it overflowed and carved new, devastating paths. She redirected her fury with meticulous and monstrous cruelty, not at the perpetrator, but at his victims and most especially, his innocent children. Her vengeance was not a momentary flash of anger, it was an art form. She was a master of psychological torment, a strategist of suffering. When the Titaness Leto was pregnant with Zeus's twin children, Apollo and Artemis, Hera unleashed a curse of exquisite cruelty. She decreed that no land that saw the light of the sun could offer Leto a place to give birth. She then dispatched the monstrous serpent, Python, to hunt the pregnant Titaness across the face of the earth. In constant agony and terror, Leto wandered, rejected by every island and continent, until the barren floating rock of Delos, which was not technically land, took pity on her and gave her sanctuary. Her most famous vendetta was waged against Heracles, the greatest of all Greek heroes. His very name was a bitter, ironic attempt to placate her. Heracles, the glory of Hera. It did not work. She was his nemesis from birth. When he was but an infant in his crib, she sent 2 venomous serpents to kill him, only to watch in frustration as the prodigal child joyfully strangled them. Later, when he was a grown man, a happy husband and father, she inflicted a temporary madness upon him. In his delirium he saw his wife and children as enemies and slaughtered them. His famous 12 labors were the penance for a crime she had forced him to commit. Every step of his heroic journey was shadowed by her hatred. She was the great paradox of Olympus, the patron of childbirth who relentlessly persecuted children, the goddess of marriage who spent her immortal life consumed by the fallout of a broken one. In her quest to punish the innocent, she became a prolific architect of tragedy. The shining queen of heaven was also the matron of monsters and misery, her crown forged of love, but lined with the thorns of eternal, righteous resentment. Poseidon, the majestic earthshaker, the unforgiving tide. Let us leave the charged atmosphere of the royal court and journey to the world below, the domain of the second brother Poseidon, master of the oceans, creator of the horse and the earthshaker. His power is more ancient, more elemental than that of Zeus. He is the untamed spirit of the natural world, majestic, life-giving, and terrifyingly vast. But like the ocean itself, Poseidon's temperament could shift from tranquil blue to black, destructive fury in the blink of an eye. His corridors are not hidden. His rage is on full, terrifying display. His pride was as deep as the Marianas Trench, and his vengeance for any slight, real or perceived, was devastatingly disproportionate. Consider the tale of King Minos of Crete. When vying for the throne, Minos prayed to Poseidon to send a sign of divine favor. Poseidon obliged, sending a breathtakingly beautiful white bull from the depths of the sea. The understanding was clear. This magnificent creature was to be immediately sacrificed in the god's honor. But Minos, overwhelmed by the bull's beauty and his own arrogance, decided to keep it for his herd and sacrifice a lesser animal instead. He thought the god of the seas would not notice or would not care. The insult was intolerable. Poseidon did not simply strike Minos down with the tidal wave. His vengeance was far more creative, more intimate, more psychologically ruinous. He did not punish Minos directly, but his wife, Queen Pasiphae. The sea god afflicted her with a maddening, unnatural lust for the very bull her husband had refused to sacrifice. Consumed by this divine curse, the queen commissioned the master craftsman Daedalus to build a hollow wooden cow, which she hid inside to seduce the beast. From this cursed union was born the Asterion, the starry one, better known as the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, a ravenous monster that fed on human flesh. It was a living, breathing monument to the queen's shame and the king's hubris. Minos was forced to build the great labyrinth to contain the monstrous evidence of his impiety. The saga of the Minotaur, which would claim the lives of countless Athenian youths, was born entirely from Poseidon's wounded pride. His most famous feud was, of course, with the clever hero Odysseus. After the king of Ithaca and his men were trapped and eaten by Poseidon's son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, Odysseus managed to blind the creature to escape, an act of self-preservation. But to Poseidon, it was an unforgivable attack on his offspring. For 10 long years the sea god became Odysseus's personal tormentor, a relentless force of divine hatred. He unleashed storms that shattered his ships, guided sea monsters to his path, and ensured that the hero's journey home was an odyssey of profound suffering and loss. It was not justice, it was a grudge, held with the implacable crushing force of the tide. Hephaestus, the brilliant creator, the wounded outcast. Now let us turn from the kings and seek out the true architect of Olympus's splendor. We must descend into the fiery, beating heart of the mountain itself, to the volcanic forge of Hephaestus. He is the god of craftsmanship, of invention, fire, and the forge. He is the son of Zeus and Hera, or perhaps, in some tales, the son of Hera alone, conceived in a jealous rage to spite Zeus for giving birth to Athena from his own head. He is the most brilliant artisan in the cosmos. His hands built the golden palaces of the gods. He forged their indestructible thrones. He crafted the arrows of Apollo and Artemis, the war chariot of Ares, and most critically, the very thunderbolts that secured Zeus's reign. The shining glory of the shining city is quite literally his handiwork. But Hephaestus himself is not glorious. In the pantheon of physical perfection, he is the sole exception. He was born lame and deformed, an affront to the Olympian aesthetic. The stories of his youth are tales of brutal rejection. One version claims that Hera, so disgusted by his imperfection at his birth, seized him and hurled him from the heavens. Another, more popular tale, says it was Zeus who threw him from the celestial peak for daring to take his mother's side in an argument. For an entire day he fell, a crippled god tumbling through the sky, before landing broken on the island of Lemnos. He is the living, breathing embodiment of a dark, uncomfortable truth for the Olympians. They are utterly dependent on the one being whose appearance they scorn. His forge is the literal dark, hidden corridor of Olympus. It is the engine room, a place of sweat, toil, and fire, whose labor makes the effortless luxury of the gods above possible. They admire his work, but they mock the worker. The cruelty of his fate was perfected in his marriage. In a cosmic joke of breathtaking irony, the gods wedded him to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire, who had herself been born from the sea foam created by Uranus's castration. The most beautiful goddess was bound to the ugliest god. Her infidelity was immediate, passionate, and relentless, most notoriously with the handsome, brutal, and simple-minded god of war, a rest physical ideal that Hephaestus could never be. But Hephaestus was a craftsman of vengeance as well as metal. Learning of their trysts, he did not challenge Ares to a fight. Instead, he returned to his forge and created his masterpiece of humiliation. He fashioned a net of golden chains, as fine as a spider's web but as strong as adamant, and completely invisible. He rigged it above his marriage bed. The next time Ares and Aphrodite lay together, the net fell, trapping them, naked and helpless. But Hephaestus did not want private vengeance. He wanted public shame. He threw open the doors and summoned all the other gods to come and witness the spectacle. They came and they laughed. They laughed at the adulterous pair, but they also laughed at Hephaestus, the cuckolded husband. He had exposed their shame, but in doing so, laid his own deep humiliation bare for all of heaven to see. Hephaestus is the wounded heart of Olympus, the rejected son, the brilliant but unloved creator. The fire in his forge is the fire of creation, but it is also the slow, smoldering burn of a resentment that sits at the very core of the shining city, a constant, quiet reminder that even in paradise, there are outcasts, and that beauty is often built on a foundation of pain. The family portrait is now clearer. A paranoid king, a vengeful queen, a prideful brother, and a broken craftsman. The stage is set. The divine family, a pantheon of glorious, broken gods, sits upon their thrones. Now we shall see what happens when the shadows from their hidden corridors spill down the slopes of Olympus and into the fragile lives of mortals. We have walked the celestial halls and met the divine family in all their splendid, terrible complexity. We have seen the king and his paranoia, the queen and her vengeance, the sea lord and his rage. But the true nature of a power structure is never fully revealed by observing its rulers in isolation. It is revealed in how they treat the ruled. And so we must descend from the shining peak. We must leave the corridors of gold and marble and enter the fragile lives of mortals, for it is here, on the anvil of human suffering, that the character of the Olympian gods is truly forged. The ancient Greeks had a word for the greatest of all mortal sins: hubris. We often translate it simply as pride, but its meaning is far deeper, far more resonant. Hubris is not just arrogance. It is the act of a mortal forgetting their place. It is challenging the gods, yes, but it is also imitating them, ignoring them, claiming their gifts as one's own, or most dangerously exposing their flaws. It is the sin of stepping out of the designated box of mortal limitation. The stories that follow are not merely myths. They are case studies. They are exhibits presented as evidence of the true nature of divine justice. These are the cautionary tales whispered by parents to their children around flickering hearths, tales of what happens when the gaze of Olympus falls upon you, and finds you wanting, or worse, finds you interesting. Case Study 1. Prometheus, the punishment for compassion. In the beginning of the human experiment, mankind was a wretched thing. A shivering, ignorant race living without purpose or comfort. From his high throne, Zeus looked down upon them with indifference, if not contempt. They were ephemeral creatures, a brief and brutish footnote in his cosmic reign, unworthy of the divine gifts reserved for the immortals. But one being saw them differently, the Titan Prometheus. His name means forethought, and he was a remnant of the old world, a being who remembered a time before Olympian rule. He was not blinded by the Olympian self-proclaimed glory. Looking down upon the shivering masses, he did not see insignificant beasts. He felt pity. He saw a flicker of potential, a spark of intelligence waiting for a flame. It was an act of profound compassion, and in the economy of Olympus, compassion for mortals was not a currency the king traded in. Zeus had decreed that fire, the seed of civilization, should be kept for the gods alone. To share it would be to elevate humanity, to give them a measure of power, to make them less dependent, less fearful. For Zeus, this was an unacceptable risk to the established order. For Prometheus, it was a moral imperative. In an act of sublime defiance, Prometheus ascended to the heavens. Some say he went to the forge of Hephaestus on Olympus itself, others that he journeyed to the sun. He took a hollow stalk of a giant fennel plant, and touching it to the sacred flames, he stole a single glowing ember. He concealed this cosmic spark and hurried back to the world of men, a thief who had stolen not gold or jewels, but the future itself. He gave them fire, and with that single gift he changed the course of history. Humanity crawled out of its caves and into the light. With fire they warmed their homes, cooked their food, and forged tools instead of using sharp rocks. The night was no longer a realm of absolute terror, but Prometheus did not stop there. He became their great teacher. He taught them the arts of writing and mathematics, the science of medicine, the secrets of agriculture, and how to read the stars for navigation. He took a shivering animal and gave it the means to become a philosopher, an artist, a builder. He was the benefactor, the uplifter, the true father of civilization. To Zeus, this was not a gift. It was the ultimate act of treason. His carefully constructed hierarchy had been violated. His authority had been flouted by a titan who dared to pity mortals. The punishment had to be more than death. It had to be a statement. It had to be a spectacle of eternal agony, a warning etched into the face of the mountains for any god or mortal who would ever consider defying him again. He had Prometheus dragged to the desolate, wind-swept peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, at the very edge of the world. He commanded Hephaestus, the reluctant craftsman, to perform the grim task. With a heavy heart, the smith god shackled the titan to the rock with chains of unbreakable adamant. And then the true exquisite horror of the punishment began. Every single day, as the sun reached its zenith, a great eagle, the very symbol of Zeus's royal authority, his personal emblem, would descend from the sky. It was not a scavenger happening upon a meal. It was a torturer arriving for its daily work. The eagle would land upon Prometheus's chest, tear through his skin and muscle with its cruel talons, and begin to eat his liver. Prometheus, an immortal, could not die, could not lose consciousness. He was forced to endure the excruciating pain, to feel his own immortal flesh being ripped from his body. And every night after the eagle had departed, leaving him in a bloody heap, his divine nature would reassert itself. His wounds would heal. His liver would regenerate completely. He would be made whole again, only to face the dawn with the full terrifying knowledge that the eagle would return. It was a perfect self-sustaining system of torture, a cycle of agony, regeneration, and anticipation without end. This was the justice of Zeus. Cold, absolute, and infinitely sadistic. The compassion that had sparked human civilization was repaid with an eternity of torment, his screams swallowed by the uncaring wind. Case Study 2, Arachne, the punishment for artistry. Let us now turn from a crime of compassion to a crime of creation. In the mortal land of Lydia lived a young woman named Arachne. She was not a princess or a priestess. Her renown came not from her birth, but from her hands. She was a weaver of such sublime, breathtaking skill that the tapestries she created were set to rival life itself. Nymphs would leave their streams and forests just to watch her work, to see the way her fingers danced across the loom, seemingly without thought, as images of impossible beauty blossomed from the threads. So great was her talent that all who saw it whispered the same thing. Surely she must be a favored student of Pallas Athena, the goddess of wisdom, craft, and weaving herself. And here the seed of hubris was sown. Arachne, young and brilliant, bristled at the suggestion. She was proud. Too proud. She scoffed, declaring that her skill was entirely her own, born of her own hard work and genius. If Athena herself wished to compete, Arachne declared, she would not shrink from the challenge. This was an unforgivable transgression. To deny the divine source of one's gifts was to claim equality with the gods. It was a challenge that Athena could not ignore. The goddess descended to Arachne's workshop, but she came in disguise as a stooped, frail old woman with gray hair. She gently warned the young weaver, giving her a path to repentance. Seek fame among mortals for your craft, the old woman advised. But yield to the goddess. Beg her forgiveness for your rash words. Arachne laughed in the old woman's face, telling her to save her advice for her daughters. She repeated her challenge, her pride now hardened into defiance. With that, the disguise fell away. Athena stood revealed in her full, terrifying majesty, her eyes blazing with divine fire. The contest was on. They began to weave, and the room was filled with the sound of their furious work. Athena's tapestry was a masterpiece of divine propaganda. In its center, she wove the glorious scene of her contest with Poseidon for control of the city of Athens, she offering the wise and useful olive tree. he offering the salty spring of war. The gods sat in judgment, awarding her the victory. It was a story of order, wisdom, and her own rightful glory. In the four corners she wove smaller scenes, each a stark warning. Mortals who had dared to challenge the gods and had been transformed into mountains or birds for their insolence. Her tapestry was beautiful to be sure, but it was also a threat. Arachne, in a final glorious act of defiance, poured all of her genius and all of her truth into her work. Her tapestry was not a tribute to the gods' power, but a stunningly beautiful exposé of their crimes. With unflinching, meticulous detail, she wove the stories of their hypocrisy and abuse. There was Europa being abducted by Zeus in the form of a bull. There was Leda being assaulted by Zeus in the form of a swan. There was Danae being visited by Zeus as a shower of gold. She depicted Poseidon, Apollo, Dionysus in their various disguises, deceiving and violating mortal women. Her work was a catalogue of divine shame, a testament to the suffering of the victims. And in terms of pure craft, the color, the composition, the lifelike detail, it was flawless. It was perfect. It was true. And that was the problem. Athena, goddess of wisdom, stared at the tapestry. She could find no flaw in its technique, no error in its artistry. She was beaten. But what she could not attack with critique, she could destroy with force. Consumed by a rage born not of artistic failure but of being exposed, she tore Arachne's magnificent, truthful tapestry to shreds. She then seized her shuttle and struck the young mortal repeatedly on the head. The sheer divine fury, the humiliation, the destruction of her life's greatest war kit broke Arachne. In terror and despair she fled and tied a noose, choosing to end her own life. But Athena, in a final horrifying act of what she might have called mercy, would not allow her that escape. As Arachne hung, the goddess sprinkled her with the juice of an herb. "Live on, wicked girl," she whispered. "But live on, hanging." A grotesque transformation began. Arachne's hair fell out, her nose and ears vanished. Her head shrank and her body withered. Her fingers, those same fingers that had woven such beauty, stretched and thinned into long spindly legs. She had been turned into the first spider. Her divine gift of artistic genius was not just erased. It was perverted into a mindless, repetitive instinct. She and her descendants were cursed to hang and spin for all eternity. A grim reminder that in the face of Olympian power, talent is no defense, and truth is the greatest hubris of all. Case Study 3. The House of Atreus, the blood-soaked inheritance. Sometimes divine cruelty is not a single swift act of punishment. Sometimes it is a slow-acting poison, a curse that seeps into the soil of a family tree, turning its sap to blood and its fruit to ashes. Such was the fate of the House of Atreus, a dynasty whose very name became synonymous with tragedy, betrayal, and blood. The darkness in these corridors was not built by the residents. It was inherited. It began with Tantalus, a son of Zeus himself, so favored that he was invited to dine with the gods on Olympus, to share their nectar and ambrosia. But this intimacy bred a terrible arrogance. He decided to test the gods' famed omniscience. In an act of unthinkable horror, he murdered his own son, Pelops, dismembered him, and served him to the gods in a stew at a grand banquet. The gods knew instantly. They recoiled in disgust from the horrific meal, all except for Demeter, who, distracted by the grief of her lost daughter Persephone, accidentally consumed a piece of the boy's shoulder. Tantalus's hubris was confirmed, and his punishment became a legend of eternal futility. He was made to stand in Tartarus in a pool of water up to his chin, but whenever he bent to quench his agonizing thirst, the water would recede. Above his head hung branches laden with luscious fruit, but whenever he reached to quell his gnawing hunger, the wind would whip them just out of his grasp. Eternal, unquenchable thirst and hunger. A perfect, ironic torture. But the gods' work was not done. They reassembled Pelops, bringing him back to life and having Hephaestus fashion him a new shoulder of gleaming ivory. But while his body was restored, his bloodline was now stained. A curse was born, a contagion of violence that would be passed from father to son for generations. Pelops' two sons, Atreus and Thyestes, vied for the throne of Mycenae. Their rivalry festered into hatred. When Atreus discovered that his wife had been seduced by Thyestes, he planned a revenge that mirrored and even surpassed his grandfather's original crime. He feigned reconciliation and invited Thyestes to a great feast. But before the banquet, he murdered Thyestes' young sons. He then had them cooked and served them to their unknowing father. After Thyestes had eaten his fill, Atreus revealed the horror, presenting the severed heads and hands of the children as proof. Thyestes, broken, screamed a new curse upon Atreus and all his descendants, adding another layer of poison to the family's fate. The curse bled into the next generation. Atreus' son was Agamemnon, the great king who would lead the Greek armies to Troy. But to even begin that journey, he was forced to feed the curse. When his fleet was becalmed at Aulis, the seer Calchas declared that the goddess Artemis demanded a sacrifice. Agamemnon's own daughter, Iphigenia. Trapped between his ambition and his love, Agamemnon chose ambition. He sacrificed his child to gain a favorable wind. 10 years later he returned from Troy a conquering hero, laden with spoils. But he returned not to a celebration, but to an ambush. His wife, Clytemnestra, her heart turned to stone by the murder of their daughter, had taken a lover, Aegisthus, the sole surviving son of the doomed Thyestes. As Agamemnon relaxed in his bath, unarmed and vulnerable, they trapped him in a net of heavy robes and brutally stabbed him to death. The son of Atreus had been murdered by the son of Thyestes. The cycle of vengeance churned on. But it still was not over. The curse demanded a final terrible payment. Agamemnon's son Orestes was now faced with an impossible choice. He was duty-bound to avenge his father's murder, but the murderer was his own mother. The god Apollo himself appeared and commanded Orestes to complete the cycle. He must kill Clytemnestra. Torn but obedient to the divine command, Orestes murdered his mother. The moment his mother's blood stained his hands, he was set upon by the Erinyes, the Furies. These were not Olympians, but ancient chthonic deities of vengeance, born from the blood of Uranus's castration. Winged snake-haired hags, they rose from the underworld to pursue him, driving him across the world to the very brink of madness. Their shrieks a constant reminder of his unforgivable crime. Cannibalism, infanticide, sacrifice, murder, matricide. The house of Atreus was not merely a family. It was a theater of cruelty, a generational slaughterhouse, with the gods acting as both audience and directors. These mortals were not free agents. They were puppets, their strings pulled by ancient curses and the capricious whims of the gods who watched their self-destruction as a form of grim entertainment. The shining city on the hill, Olympus, had very long, very dark corridors, and they reached all the way down to the blood-soaked floors of the house of Atreus. We have journeyed through the grand palaces and the haunted corridors of the Olympian court. We have stood witness to the awesome power of Zeus, a king whose authority is written in lightning. We have felt the chill of Hera's vengeance, the earth-shaking rage of Poseidon, and the quiet suffering of Hephaestus. We have descended to the mortal realm and seen lives ruined by divine cruelty and caprice, case studies in the terrible price of hubris. Through it all, a clear hierarchy has emerged. The gods on high and humanity below. The gods are the potters. Mortals are the clay. They are the players. We are the pieces on their cosmic chessboard. Zeus, as the king of gods and men, sits at the apex of this pyramid of power, the final arbiter, the ultimate authority. His will is the engine of the cosmos. But is it? We have walked the hidden corridors of Olympus, the places of shame, jealousy, and resentment. But there is one final corridor to explore. It is not a place of stone or gold. It is a corridor of absolute silence, a truth so profound and so terrifying that even Zeus himself dares not raise his voice within it. For we have made a fundamental error in our assessment. The Olympians are not the ultimate power. The king of the gods is not, in fact, the king of everything. He too serves a master. He too bows his head to a throne far older and far more powerful than his own. To find this ultimate authority, we must look away from the dazzling light of Olympus and into the primordial, unlit darkness from which all things came. We must seek out the beings who are not rulers but rules, not players but the game itself. We must speak of the Moirai, the Fates. They are not a pantheon. They do not have palaces or temples of glittering gold. They do not engage in petty squabbles or passionate affairs. They are a trinity of grim, inexorable purpose. Three sisters, ancient and implacable, who preside over the single most powerful force in creation, destiny. First is Clotho the spinner. From a distaff that holds the raw, unformed substance of all potential lives, she draws out the delicate fiber. With her timeless fingers, she twists and spins it into a single thread. This is the moment of birth, the beginning of a life, spun into existence from the void by her steady rhythmic hand. Every mortal, every hero, every king, every god each begins as a new thread pulled by Clotho. Next is Lachesis, the allotter, or the measurer of the lot. It is her task to measure the length of each new thread. But she does more than just determine the span of a life. As her fingers run along the fiber, she assigns its quality. She weaves into it threads of gold for moments of joy and triumph. She twists into it strands of black for sorrow and suffering. She makes parts of it strong and resilient, for times of heroic struggle, and other parts frayed and weak, for moments of sickness and despair. The complex tapestry of a person's entire existence, their loves, their hatreds, their successes, their failures is allotted and woven into the very fabric of their being by Lachesis. The tragedies of Prometheus, of Arachne, of the house of Atreus, were all measured and assigned by her unwavering hand before they ever came to pass. And last there is Atropos. Her name means the inflexible, the unturning. She is the eldest and the most feared. In her hand she holds a pair of shears. Her gaze is fixed, forever watching the threads as they spool out from Lachesis. When a life has reached its measured length, when the final inch of fiber has passed through her sister's hands, Atropos performs her singular solemn duty. She raises her shears and with a final metallic snip she severs the thread. There is no appeal. There is no negotiation. There is no prayer that can stay her hand. Her action is absolute, irrevocable, and final. It is the moment of death. To understand the true scope of their power, we must understand their origin. The Moirai are not Olympians. They are not children of Cronus and Rhea. Their parentage is far more ancient, far more fundamental. Some myths say they are the daughters of Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, born in the darkness before the Titans ever rose. Others claim their mother is Ananke, the personification of absolute necessity and compulsion. Either way, the implication is staggering. They predate Zeus. They predate the entire Olympian order. They are not part of the political structure of the cosmos. They are the structure. Zeus is a king who rules a kingdom. The fates are the physical laws that govern the kingdom's very existence. A king can issue pardons and edicts, but he cannot command the sun not to rise or gravity not to pull. In the same way, Zeus can command gods and men, but he cannot command the fates. They are senior to him in every way that matters. Evidence of this terrifying truth is woven throughout Greek mythology, a quiet but persistent whisper behind the louder tales of Olympian drama. The most poignant example can be found in the blood-soaked fields of the Trojan War. Within the pages of Homer's Iliad, Zeus is watching the battle from on high, and he sees his own mortal son, the noble Trojan ally Sarpedon, fighting valiantly. But Zeus, being omniscient, also sees what is coming. He sees that Sarpedon is fated to be killed by the Greek hero Patroclus. The king of the gods is overcome with grief. He holds the power to shatter mountains and boil seas. Yet he watches his beloved son approach his doom. He weeps tears of blood that fall upon the earth. He turns to his wife Hera and laments, contemplating the unthinkable, using his power to snatch Sarpedon from the battle and spirit him away, alive, to his homeland. He considers breaking the laws of destiny. It is Hera, his perennial adversary, who becomes the voice of cosmic reason. She speaks to him not as a jealous wife, but as a co-ruler who understands the terrifying stakes. She warns him, "If you send Sarpedon home alive, a man who is mortal and long since doomed by fate, think how many other gods will then wish to save their own dear sons from the fighting. You will throw the entire cosmos into unending strife." Her message is clear. If you, the king, defy the fates for your own son, you create a precedent. Every other god will demand the same privilege. The entire ordered structure of life and death, the very foundation of reality, will collapse into chaos. Anarchy will be unleashed, far worse than the Titanomachy. Zeus would be destroying the very order he fought to create, all for the love of one son. And so, with a heavy heart, the king of gods and men does nothing. He allows his son to be slain. He bows his head not to Patroclus, not to the Greek army, but to the decree of the three sisters and their inexorable thread. In that moment of inaction, the entire power dynamic of the universe is laid bare. Zeus is not the ultimate authority. He is the ultimate enforcer. He is the warden of a prison whose laws he did not write and cannot change. This concept reframes everything we think we know about the gods. Consider Apollo, the god of prophecy, and his famous oracle at Delphi. Pilgrims came from all over the world to hear the cryptic pronouncements of the Pythia. But what was Apollo truly doing? He was not creating the future. He was not even offering advice on how to change it. He was merely a reader. The god of light and knowledge had been granted the terrifying privilege of being able to glimpse the patterns woven by the fates. The prophecies of the oracle were not suggestions. They were spoilers. They were glimpses of a script that was already written. The tragic tale of Oedipus, who did everything in his power to avoid his fate of killing his father and marrying his mother, only to run headfirst into it, is the ultimate testament to this. Knowledge of one's fate does not grant power over it. It only makes one a more aware participant in its inevitable unfolding. With this new knowledge, let us look again at the family portrait of the gods. Their flaws, their passions, their regesto, they still look the same? Could Zeus's legendary paranoia and his constant, frantic procreation of children be more than just predatory lust? Could it be the desperate, calculated struggle of a king who knows he is not truly sovereign? A frantic attempt to spread his lineage, to sire heroes and demigods, to stamp his own personal mark onto the tapestry of destiny in the only way he can, because he knows he cannot reweave the tapestry itself. His reign is a constant roaring assertion of a power he knows, in his heart of hearts, is not absolute. And Hera's all-consuming jealousy, could it be more than the fury of a scorned wife? Perhaps she is not just protecting her marriage, but protecting the fragile order of the cosmos itself. When Zeus's chaotic affairs create demigods and spark wars, he is pulling and tearing at the threads of destiny, introducing knots and tangles into a pattern that is already set. Perhaps Hera's rage is that of a being who sees her husband recklessly shaking a building whose foundations she knows are predetermined and finite. It is a desperate, violent attempt to enforce stability in a system whose ultimate outcome is terrifyingly out of her hands. The gods of Olympus, for all their power, for all their glory, are living in a gilded cage. Their immortality is not a blessing of infinite freedom, but a curse of eternal imprisonment. They are actors in a grand, cosmic tragedy, and they have been given a copy of the script. They know how it all ends. They know of the prophecies of Ragnarok, of the twilight of the gods, a future day when their own order will crumble. This, then, is the darkest, most secret corridor of Olympus. It is not a physical place but a philosophical realization. The gut-wrenching eldritch horror that lies at the center of this shining city is the truth of determinism, the realization that free will is an illusion even for the gods. Their struggles, their triumphs, their magnificent creations, and their horrifying cruelties are all just the furious, beautiful, tragic death throes of beings caught in the inexorable, indifferent web of fate. They are the roar of a caged lion, all the more powerful and terrifying because it knows it can never ever escape. The ultimate power in the cosmos is not a thunderbolt. It is not a trident. It is not a crown. It is the quiet, humble, relentless hum of a spindle, the dry rasp of a thread being measured, and the final irrefutable silence that follows the closing of a pair of shears.